Joe Monahan settled in this area and was a wrangler, well known for the ability to break horses, and worked for a lot of ranchers around here. Ranched as a wrangler, wiry little guy, small hands, but could rope as well as anybody. When in those days, when somebody died, if it was a woman, the woman prepared them for burial, and if it was a guy, the men prepared him for burial. Well, son of a gun, Joe was a woman. Josephine Monahan lived her life a man. Uh, Supposedly, she sent money to a boy in California from time to time. So it's thought that maybe she had a son down there. And they did track down her relatives back east somewhere. I can't remember where, Brooklyn or someplace like that. But anyway, yeah, she's buried out here. Yeah, she's buried out here.
The last truly mythical period in history was the Wild West, because even though East Coast society would often reject your values and your character, you could always move out there and, through a true meritocracy system, assert yourself as a hard worker and be able to fit in. And if you couldn't fit in, you could do what Daniel Boone said and just move as soon as you begin to see the smoke from your neighbor's homestead. And this was the kind of attitude that was had with a lot of the freed black pioneers, a lot of the fur trappers, a lot of the people who had Indian wives back when that was incredibly unpopular, and the huge number of LGBT pioneers and cowboys. I really want to thank Ken Stanzel. In fact, I really consider him a good friend because he responded and was very eager to show me around when I was expressing interest in some of the history in what's called Ion Country. That is the Idaho, Oregon, Nevada area, the high desert, and some of the most remote parts of those three states where very few people live in. I've heard it said it's a big country, but there's very few people out here, and it seems like everybody knows everybody else and everybody remembers a little bit of the stories. The hospitality you'll find in this part of the world is totally unmatched. In fact, Ken took me out on an entire day ATV tour in the playground that is his backyard, the Hawaii Mountains, showing me sights from the range wars and cowboy history and homesteads, and it was just a fantastic time. Please check out his YouTube channel. Again, link in the description. And to go a little bit more into the historic fact of Joe Monahan's life, he was born Joanna Monahan in 1850 in Buffalo, New York. Now, apparently, there was a lot of talk after Joe Monahan's death in 1904, so a lot of these stories are hearsay. And one of the more popular rumors is that even though at the time Joanna was identifying as a girl, her mother would dress her up as a boy and have him go sell newspapers and say, "This is Joe Monahan," and because that was a boy's job. And in any event, at age 14, Joanna ran away from her boarding school and made her way over to Idaho, where she arrived sometime around 1867, although she quickly started filling the role of a male and taking on the name Joe Monahan. In fact, the ranchers called him Little Joe, and I think the most fascinating part of this story is that a lot of people very likely knew that Little Joe was born a woman, although the issue was very rarely raised. In 1880, Joe Monahan voted in the Republican primary, which would have been illegal if it was known that he was biologically a woman, although nobody really raised any concern. In fact, there were three censuses taken, all of which marked him down as male, although the last one had an asterisk saying gender doubtful. And so he slowly made his way along the Oregon Trail and down to Boise. Now, at the time, Boise was more or less a Home Depot. You could go there for supplies, but it was really only a waypoint to get to the gold fields of the Deep South. But because the boom was mostly over, people like Joe would easily find work if they worked hard enough, raising pigs and chickens and living in small little homesteads along the creeks. And the creek that Joe Monahan lived at was the Succor Creek, which fed into what is now Silver City, a huge boomtown, basically the capital of Idaho Territory. And Joe was kind of coming and going back and forth between Oregon and Idaho. In fact, he is now buried in the Rockville Cemetery, just over on the Oregon side of the border, and it's even a legend that he possibly took part in a sort of robbery, because these areas were very sparsely populated. and the ranchers would often take people in even though they had seedy pasts, so long as they could fulfill themselves as good people. They built this here on the road from Oregon over to Silver City.
This was between Boise and Silver City. It came around and went
through French John Hill.
Yeah, French John Hill is over here. We'll go up there.
And I think one of the things that is the most telling about this being a true meritocracy and the ranchers knowing his true birth gender, but understanding and still choosing to respect his choice to live as a man, is a letter that they sent to the police chief in Buffalo, New York, looking for next of kin. The letter read like this. He fought his way through with many of us, suffered hardship and hunger in early days, and never whimpered. The cowboys treated him with the greatest of respect, and he was always welcome to eat and sleep in their camps. This was in 1904, well after the public had become very aware of the birth identity of Joe Monahan. And rather than act shocked that Joe Monahan was born a woman, these ranchers doubled down in their respect. They began referring to Joe as he in all of the letters back to the family in Buffalo, New York. They buried him under the name Joe Monahan. And at the time, there were plays made, and newspaper articles, and exposés. And in 1993, the movie The Ballet of Little Joe came out. Now, I haven't watched this movie yet, but it looks pretty good, and I'm going to have to sit down sometime and give it a watch.
Little Joe, you are the unfriendliest fella I ever met, and frankly, quite peculiar.
What do you think would happen if they found out about me?
You made a fool out of me, Josephine.
Little Joe Monahan turns out to be a woman.
I'll keep my promise, Josephine.
They kill us. You don't, Percy. I'll find you, and I will kill you.
The Ballad of Little Joe.